The moment Gefreiter Heinrich Severloh looked through his gun sight on the morning of June 6, 1944, he believed the invasion would be over in hours. 9 hours later, surrounded by 13,500 empty shell casings and a gun barrel warped from heat, he would be weeping uncontrollably as he watched something his mind refused to accept: the entire world arriving on his doorstep. Omaha Beach, 00:15 hours. Severloh carefully cleaned the barrel of his MG-42 machine gun in the concrete bunker of strongpoint WN-62. The night was peaceful, almost serene. In his pocket, he carried a letter from his girlfriend back in Metzingen, promising to wait for his victorious return. Just 3 days earlier, he had written her with absolute confidence: "The invasion will be their grave." These weren't empty words. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel himself had inspected their positions, looked through Severloh's gun aperture, studied the overlapping fields of fire, and nodded with satisfaction. Through the embrasure, Severloh saw nothing but darkness over the channel. He had no idea that in 12 hours he would witness something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. But before we understand the nightmare that was about to unfold, you need to grasp what the Germans truly believed they had built. The Atlantic Wall stretched 2,400 miles from Norway to the Spanish border. German propaganda called it the most formidable defensive line in military history, and on paper they had reason for confidence. 2 million tons of steel. Hitler himself had declared it impregnable, and the soldiers manning those bunkers believed him. At Omaha Beach alone, the preparations seemed overwhelming. 8 concrete bunkers, 35 pillboxes, 4 artillery positions, 18 anti-tank gun positions, 45 rocket launcher sites, 85 machine gun nests, and 6 mortar pits. But that was just the beginning. The beach itself had been transformed into a killing field. 3,700 obstacles planted in the tidal zone, Belgian gates, Czech hedgehogs, wooden stakes, many topped with teller mines. 5 million mines waited in the sand. Rommel had wanted 60 million. Colonel Ernst Goth, commanding the 916th Grenadier Regiment, had calculated that his batteries alone could deliver 120 rounds per minute into the beach sectors. These calculations, however, assumed something critical: unlimited ammunition. That assumption would prove fatally wrong. If you find our content valuable, we kindly encourage you to support the channel by subscribing and liking the video. Now, let's return to the story. June 5th brought weather that seemed to confirm German invincibility. Luftwaffe meteorologist Walter Stubb in Paris had declared invasion conditions impossible. Wind speeds reached 20 to 25 knots, waves climbed to 6 feet, and low clouds hung at 500 feet. Using data from U-boats and weather stations, Stubb assured the High Command that conditions would remain poor for at least 2 weeks. Based on this forecast, the unthinkable happened. Many senior officers left their posts. Rommel himself departed for Germany to celebrate his wife's birthday, carrying a pair of gray suede shoes he'd purchased in Paris. General Friedrich Dahlmann ordered division commanders to attend war games at Rennes. Even the naval patrols were canceled due to rough seas. What the Germans didn't know was that the Allies possessed weather stations in Greenland and weather flights over the Atlantic that had detected something Stobbe's network had missed: a brief break in the storm, a 36-hour window, and Eisenhower had seized it. At 23:15 hours on June 5th, German radar operators along the Norman coast began detecting unusual activity. Freya and Würzburg radar sets picked up massive aerial formations approaching from the north. But the operators had seen this before. Allied deception raids designed to keep them on alert. They watched, bored, expecting another false alarm. By 00:30 hours on June 6th, something changed. Reports began flooding in that challenged everything. Fallschirmjäger paratroopers were landing across Normandy, but the reports made no sense. Some units reported paratroopers to the east, others to the west. Some claimed British, others American. Dummy paratroopers with firecrackers attached added to the chaos. This was part of Operations Titanic and Rupert, and it was working perfectly. Major Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment of the 21st Panzer Division, was one of the first to grasp what was happening. Awakened by reports of paratroopers landing near his positions, he immediately requested permission to attack. Von Luck would later write, "I knew at that moment we were lost. The paratroopers were clearly marking flanks for a landing. Every minute we waited gave them time to consolidate. Bombay. 5:30 hours. As the first gray light began to illuminate the channel, German observers in forward positions began reporting something their training had never prepared them for. Severloh, whose exact presence at the coast that early remains debated by some historians, was among those who witnessed it first. From horizon to horizon, the sea was covered with vessels. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. Ships of every size and description, from massive battleships to tiny landing craft, spreading across the channel like a gray carpet that seemed to have no end. The invasion fleet consisted of 6,039 vessels, 1,213 warships, 4,126 landing craft, 736 ancillary vessels, and 864 merchant ships. It was the largest naval armada ever assembled in human history. To German defenders raised on propaganda about Allied weakness and division, the sight was psychologically devastating. One artillery officer at WN-62, who would be killed later that day, reportedly told his men they were witnessing the entire world arriving on their doorstep. He wasn't exaggerating. At 05:35 hours, the naval bombardment commenced. Nothing in the German defenders' experience had prepared them for what followed. Not the Eastern Front, not the heaviest RAF raids, nothing. The battleship USS Texas alone fired 255 14-inch shells at Pointe du Hoc in just 34 minutes. HMS Warspite delivered over 300 15-inch shells in the first 2 days. The cumulative bombardment exceeded anything the Wehrmacht had previously encountered. Concrete bunkers designed to withstand any bombardment cracked under the naval gunfire like eggshells. Men were buried alive, dug out, and buried again as shells continued to rain down. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical destruction. These fortifications in which they had placed absolute confidence were crumbling. As the bombardment continued, the Luftwaffe's response revealed the true desperation of the German position. Oberstleutnant Josef Pips Priller, commanding Jagdgeschwader 26, received orders to attack the invasion fleet with his entire force. His response, recorded in the Wing's war diary, was stark. What entire force? The Luftwaffe, which had promised air superiority over any invasion, could muster only 319 sorties on D-Day against 14,074 Allied sorties. Priller and his wingman made the only Luftwaffe attack on the beaches during the morning of June 6th, strafing Sword Beach once before fleeing from overwhelming Allied fighter cover. This single strafing run by 2 planes against an invasion force of thousands became a symbol of German impotence. 06:30 hours. The first assault waves hit the beaches. German defenders, despite the bombardment, manned their positions and opened fire. What followed was carnage that shocked even hardened veterans. Heinrich Severloh at WN-62 began firing at 06:35 hours. His position, one of the few undamaged by the bombardment, commanded perfect fields of fire across Omaha Beach. He would fire 13,500 rounds over 9 hours. His MG-42, firing at a rate of 1,200 rounds per minute in short controlled bursts, contributed significantly to what became known as Bloody Omaha. Severloh later claimed between 1,000 and 2,000 casualties, though historians consider this impossible given total American casualties at Omaha from all causes were approximately 2,400. The mental breakdown caused by confronting overwhelming force. No matter how many Americans fell, more appeared. Every destroyed landing craft was replaced by 3 more. Every silenced machine gun position was suppressed by naval gunfire that seemed unlimited. The mathematics of war were turning against them in real time, and they could see it happening. By midday, German positions began reporting critical ammunition shortages. The defensive plans had calculated expenditure based on repelling a limited assault. Nobody had planned for this scale of attack. Positions that had ammunition calculated for a 3-day battle exhausted their supplies within hours. Artillery batteries faced similar crises. Every road was under constant Allied fighter bomber attack, making resupply impossible. The contrast was stark. American destroyers would fire hundreds of shells at single targets, while German artillery was rationed to 4 shells per gun per day by the afternoon of D-Day. The German Armor Reserve, the force Rommel had insisted must defeat any invasion on the beaches, remained paralyzed through the critical morning hours. The 21st Panzer Division, the only armored unit close to the beaches, did not receive orders to attack until 10 o'clock hours, 4 hours after the landings began. When they finally attacked at 16:20 hours, they advanced between British airborne landing zones toward the coast. They reached the shore around 1900 hours, the only German armored unit to reach the coast on D-Day. For a brief moment, it seemed like they might create the counterattack Rommel had envisioned. Then, at 2100 hours, they witnessed something that changed everything. Operation Mallard, 250 gliders bringing reinforcements to the British 6th Airborne Division. Interpreting this massive air armada as a threat to their flanks, they withdrew. The division lost 54 tanks and armored vehicles on D-Day, approximately 25% of their strength in a single day, without achieving any strategic objective. The counterattack also encountered specialized Allied armor they had never seen before. Hobart's Funnies. Modified tanks with flails for mine clearing, flamethrowers, and bridging equipment. It seemed to belong to a different era of warfare entirely. Throughout D-Day, German units faced massive airborne forces operating behind their lines. The 6th Airborne Division, the 82nd, and the 101st created chaos that multiplied their actual strength far beyond their numbers. Oberst Friedrich von der Heydte, Germany's most experienced paratrooper commander, was in Normandy during the invasion. His professional assessment was damning. The Allied airborne operation was everything ours had never been. Massive, coordinated, and supplied. We dropped battalions, they dropped divisions. We were supplied by single aircraft. The psychological impact of paratroopers appearing everywhere paralyzed German responses. Units refused to move, fearing ambush. Others fired at shadows, sometimes at their own men. As D-Day progressed, German command and control disintegrated. Allied aircraft systematically destroyed communication lines. French resistance, activated by coded BBC messages, cut telephone cables and destroyed relay stations. Radio communications were jammed. General Lieutenant Max Pemsel, Chief of Staff of the 7th Army, attempted to coordinate the defense from his headquarters at Le Mans. His war diary records increasing frustration as contact with forward units disappeared. By noon, entire divisions had vanished from the communication network. Individual commanders made decisions in isolation without knowledge of the larger picture. As darkness fell on June 6th, surviving German defenders took stock of their situation. The impregnable Atlantic Wall had been breached in multiple places. The Luftwaffe had essentially ceased to exist over Normandy. The Kriegsmarine had managed to sink one destroyer, USS Corrie, while losing 15 E-boats and numerous smaller craft. General Lieutenant Wilhelm Richter, commanding the 716th Division, which had borne the brunt of the British assault, reported to 7th Army headquarters. Division combat strength 35%, all coastal strongpoints lost, artillery 9% destroyed. The statistics told a story of complete tactical failure despite individual acts of heroism. Throughout the night of June 6th to 7th, German units attempted to regroup and counterattack. These efforts revealed the full extent of Allied superiority. Every German movement was detected by radar, illuminated by flares, and destroyed by artillery or naval gunfire. Hans von Luck's Panzer Grenadiers, finally released to counterattack, advanced towards Sword Beach in darkness. According to his memoir, they were immediately illuminated by parachute flares and subjected to devastating fire from destroyers offshore. It was like daylight, he wrote. Every vehicle, every soldier was visible. The shells came from the sea with perfect accuracy. Meanwhile, Allied reinforcements continued landing. The artificial mulberry harbors were already being assembled. Supply ships anchored in organized rows. The invasion wasn't just succeeding, it was transforming into a permanent presence. As German reinforcements attempted to reach Normandy, they encountered complete interdiction of movement. Every road, railway, and bridge was under constant attack. Units that should have reached the front in one day took up to 2 weeks. 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich, stationed near Toulouse, took 17 days to reach Normandy, a journey that should have taken 3 days. They arrived having lost 30% of their vehicles to air attack without firing a shot at ground forces. The psychological impact was devastating. If they couldn't even reach the battlefield intact, how could they hope to influence it? Meanwhile, Allied logistics operated with stunning efficiency. LSTs discharged entire armored regiments in hours. Within days of D-Day, the Allies were landing 15,000 tons of supplies daily, more than the entire German army in Normandy consumed in a week. By June 12th, German forces in Normandy were approaching psychological collapse. They had lost 26,000 men killed, wounded, or missing, roughly equivalent to 2 full divisions. Replacements were minimal. Meanwhile, Allied strength grew hourly. Carentan fell, linking Utah and Omaha beaches. German paratroopers of the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, elite troops who had never previously retreated, withdrew in disorder. Their commander, Friedrich von der Heydt, reported, "My regiment no longer exists as a combat unit." On June 13th, SS Obersturmführer Michael Wittmann achieved one of the few German tactical victories in Normandy. He destroyed 13 to 14 tanks, 2 anti-tank guns, and 13 to 15 personnel carriers at Villers-Bocage within 15 minutes. German propaganda seized on this victory as proof that German arms could still prevail. But even this victory revealed the futility of the German position. Wittmann's Tiger tank, disabled in the battle, was replaced by the Germans with great difficulty. The British losses were replaced within hours. The tactical brilliance of individual German soldiers could not overcome industrial mathematics. Wittmann himself, with 138 confirmed tank kills across all fronts, was killed on August 8th when his Tiger was destroyed. The Wehrmacht's greatest tank ace was eliminated by an enemy that could afford to trade 10 tanks for 1 Tiger. The fall of Cherbourg on June 26th provided another psychological blow. This major port, fortified over 4 years and garrisoned by 21,000 men, was supposed to hold for months. It fell in 5 days of serious fighting. General-Lieutenant Karl Wilhelm von Schlieben, commanding the garrison, had proclaimed he would defend Cherbourg to the last bullet. Instead, he surrendered. In his post-war interrogation, he explained that resistance became meaningless against unlimited enemy resources, a theme that would echo throughout German accounts of Normandy. Operation Cobra, beginning July 25th, delivered the knockout punch. The preparatory bombardment involved 1,500 heavy bombers, 380 medium bombers, and 550 fighter bombers, dropping over 4,100 tons of bombs in a concentrated area just 7,000 yards wide and 20,500 yards deep. General-Lieutenant Fritz Bayerlein, commanding Panzer Lehr Division, reported, "My division is annihilated. The psychological effect on the survivors is indescribable." The bombing was so intense that it killed Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, the highest-ranking American officer killed in the European theater, who was observing from what was thought to be a safe distance. If American generals weren't safe from their own firepower, what chance did German soldiers have? The Falaise Pocket, August 12th to 21st, became the graveyard of German forces in Normandy. Approximately 10,000 Germans died in the pocket and 50,000 were captured. Over 300 tanks and armored vehicles were destroyed along with 2,500 other vehicles. German soldiers attempting to escape described scenes of apocalyptic destruction. Roads were carpeted with dead horses and burning vehicles. Allied fighter bombers attacked in waves every 20 minutes. Artillery fell continuously. The systematic destruction was so complete that many soldiers simply gave up, preferring captivity to certain death. The final accounting of the Normandy campaign tells a story of complete German defeat. From June 3rd to August 31st, approximately 320,000 German casualties, 30,000 killed, 80,000 wounded, 210,000 missing or captured, 2,300 tanks destroyed, virtually all armor in France, 2,127 aircraft lost. Allied losses, 29,000 casualties with replacements exceeding losses daily. Approximately 4,000 tanks lost, replaced within weeks. 400 aircraft lost from a force exceeding 13,000. The disparity revealed the fundamental truth. Germany was fighting a war of attrition it could not win against an enemy with virtually unlimited reserves. Professional German officers provided the most objective assessments. General der Panzertruppen Heinrich Eberbach, who assumed command in Normandy after Rommel was wounded, reported to OKW on August 1st, "The enemy's material superiority is at least 20 to 1 in artillery, 10 to 1 in tanks, and absolute in aircraft. He can replace all losses within days." General Hans Speidel, Rommel's chief of staff, wrote in his 1949 memoir, "Normandy proved that courage alone could not overcome industrial supremacy." Erwin Rommel left the most powerful testament to the Normandy experience. In his final report to Hitler on July 15th, 2 days before being severely wounded by Allied aircraft, he wrote, "The troops are fighting heroically everywhere, but the unequal struggle is nearing its end. The enemy's overwhelming superiority in men and material is beginning to tell." This was military language for complete defeat. Rommel, Germany's most celebrated commander, was telling Hitler the war was lost. The Normandy campaign revealed that World War II had become a production war. German soldiers witnessed American industrial capacity that defied their comprehension. Ford's Willow Run plant alone produced one B-24 bomber every 63 minutes at peak production. American factories produced 96,000 aircraft in 1944. Allied ammunition expenditure in one day exceeded German production in a month. A single American division consumed more supplies daily than an entire German corps. Hans von Luck, reflecting on Normandy in his memoir, wrote, "We learned that modern war was not about tactics or courage, but about production. The Americans had turned war into an industrial process. The German soldiers who survived Normandy were psychologically transformed. They had witnessed the complete invalidation of everything they had been taught about warfare, racial superiority, and national destiny." Heinrich Severloh spent the rest of his life haunted by his D-Day experience. In his 2005 memoir, he wrote about meeting American D-Day veterans. "We all realized we had been young men thrown into an industrial slaughterhouse." Friedrich von der Heydt, the paratrooper commander, became a professor of international law after the war. He wrote, "Normandy taught us that the era of warrior heroes was over." D-Day, from the German perspective, was not merely a military defeat. It was a complete ideological and psychological collapse. Soldiers who had conquered most of Europe discovered that everything they believed about their enemies, their cause, and their capabilities was catastrophically wrong. They had expected to face weak, divided democracies. Instead, they encountered an alliance that had transformed war into an industrial process of overwhelming efficiency. They witnessed democracy's arsenal in action. Unlimited ships, planes, tanks, and supplies flowing from factories whose capacity exceeded German comprehension. The German defenders of Normandy learned that modern war was won not on battlefields, but in factories, not by the bravest soldiers, but by the most productive societies. They discovered that the Western Allies had revolutionized warfare, turning it into a mathematical equation where production statistics mattered more than tactical brilliance. Heinrich Severloh began June 6th believing the invasion would be thrown back within hours. He ended it surrounded by thousands of empty shell casings, watching endless waves of Allied reinforcements land on the beach his position was supposed to control. His experience embodied the larger German tragedy in Normandy. Tactical success drowned in strategic impossibility. The beaches of Normandy became not just a battlefield, but a revelation. German soldiers witnessed the future of warfare, and it belonged to the societies that could produce the most material and apply it most efficiently. They had brought courage, training, and determination to the battle. The Allies brought unlimited industrial production. In trying to hold back the Allied invasion, the German defenders might as well have been trying to hold back the tide itself. They fired until their barrels melted, fought until their ammunition ran out, and watched as the Allies simply brought more of everything. The mathematics of modern war had rendered their courage irrelevant. The German soldiers who faced D-Day learned history's hardest lesson. In the age of industrial warfare, nations that could not match their enemies' production were doomed to defeat, regardless of their soldiers' skill or sacrifice. They began June 6th as warriors of the Third Reich, and ended it as witnesses to the arsenal of democracy in its full, terrifying efficiency. Their defeat was not just military, but total, a crushing demonstration that the Nazi vision of racial superiority and military dominance had collided with the reality of Allied industrial supremacy and shattered completely. The invasion they had promised to throw back into the sea had instead swept them away, carrying with it the last illusions of German victory.